Hello, so a little bit ago we made a video on making a Korok, and some people in the video's description, not description, sorry, some people in the comment section asked for a tutorial on how to actually make the Korok, and then also on the toon shader in Maya. So you might be confused why we're in Blender. It's because I thought what I would do is show you exactly how I made it in the video. So we use Maya for modeling, like mainly the hard surface stuff, and Arnold for rendering. But Blender is also a really fantastic tool, and I mainly use Blender for sculpting, just because the tools in it are better, honestly. So we're going to start out in Blender. We'll actually sculpt the Korok in Blender. It's a very, very short process. Koroks, they come in different shapes and sizes, right? Like you've probably seen in the games, but they the one that we're going to make, and they're generally like not too complicated for the model, the base model, and we'll actually end up making the mask in Maya. And doing all the shading and showing you how to use the toon shader in Maya with Arnold as well. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started, and we'll begin by adding a sphere. So we're going to come up to mesh, add, and then UV sphere. I always forget what that's called in Blender. And we'll just scale that up a little bit, maybe to something like this. And then what we'll also do is add a bunch of divisions to give us our base to sculpt off of. So we're going to come to modifiers, add a modifier, and then we're going to go to generate and then subdivision surface. Okay. Then I am going to add maybe 3 divisions for this. That should give us enough geometry. Maybe let's go to 4. Okay, and then I'm going to actually apply this modifier as well. And after we've done that, we're then going to come to the sculpting window. Okay, and now we can start actually making the shape of our Korok. So it's good to have your reference up for this. I'm going to create the same one that I did in the video. Feel free to follow along. I'm using a handy little tool called PureF. We can link that in the description just to have that up on my second screen. And yeah, let's get started on sculpting this guy. So to begin with, I'm going to take the grab tool, because this is just a sphere, right? And unless we're going to be creating the fattest, thickest Korok in the land, this isn't going to do. So I'm just going to increase the size. I'm going to right click in the viewport here and change the radius up to something like 150, probably still too low. Let's try 300. There we go. We just want a big radius so that we can pull this up more. That might actually even be too little. Let's try raising the strength up to like 1. There we go. Okay. Maybe the radius a bit more as well, just so we can take more of this, because we just want to create more of the base shape that we're looking for, which is kind of like an egg. Okay, just try and make sure that we're keeping this straight here. So we'll look at this from the side and the front, maybe. There we go. Okay, so I'm just gonna pull this out a little bit. We're kind of looking to create, like I said, a bit of an egg shape here, like this. And then we'll flatten it off a little bit on the bottom too. Something like this. Okay, so we've kind of got this like egg shape, but it's flattened off at the bottom. And I want to maybe also flatten the front and the back a little. And don't worry about it being absolutely perfect, you know. It's not really the end of the world if it's a bit lumpy, because we can always fix it later. So I am going to go with something like that. Maybe we'll make him like a bit rounder on the sides. We can also turn on symmetry up here. So if we turn on symmetry on X, we can affect both sides at the same time, which is quite handy, because we want this part at least to be quite symmetrical, but in a bit we're going to take that away. Okay, so that is good for the base. What I'm then going to do is, I think we are going to use the grab tool again, so we're going to create the feet. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down Alt and then middle mouse just to take us to the front view here, and I'm going to turn on the symmetry on X because we want to add his little feetsies. I'm going to reduce the radius now down to something like 100. A little bit too high. Maybe let's change it to like 60. And we're just going to pull those out from the bottom, like so. Okay, I'm looking at my reference. Okay, that looks pretty good to me. And then I don't want these to be too long. if your feet aren't quite in the center of the body, we can use the same move tool. We'll just increase the radius again, just to pull these back towards his center of gravity, which is very big. I mean, look at this guy. Then what else we're going to use is we're going to flatten off the bottom of these using this tool here. Okay, and then we're going to want to drastically reduce the radius for this. So we'll go to something like 50. And then just flatten off the bottom of the feet, just so they're not so pointy. And then we can hold down Shift as well, which will transfer us over to the Smooth tool. And we'll just fix that up a little bit. Okay. Sometimes the Smooth tool might be a bit too strong, so we can actually activate the Smooth tool here, and then let's maybe change the strength down to like 0.2, and then we can, instead of holding Shift, we can kind of just use it on its own. And then maybe as well, I think what we can do is just smooth out the seam here. Maybe let's increase the strength back up, so this isn't just like quite as harsh of a transition. The thing is as well, like this is kind of just a base sculpt, because the bodies aren't actually that complicated. We're going to be taking this into Maya to do the retopo anyway. We don't necessarily have to do the retopo, but it's just something I like to do, because if you want to take this model further and animate it or rig it or what have you, then you want a nice clean topology, right, to work with. Maybe let's flatten the bottom of his feet a little bit more again. Okay, something like that. That looks good to me. Next, what we'll do is the arms. So we'll come to the front again with Alt and middle mouse click, and then we'll come back to our grab tool. Okay, and then we'll see about pulling his arms out. That's a bit too small. So looking at my reference here, they kind of come out down to the side like this. Yeah, kind of like a penguin. A very weird looking penguin. A cute looking penguin, sorry, that's offensive to the Koroks. They're not weird. They are a little bit weird. Okay, something like that. And then also, if you want to bring these back over to the center again, we can just go ahead and adjust our radius back to 400, just something high enough. And then maybe a bit lower, just to make sure these are going straight. Something like that, okay? And another tool that I like to use sometimes is the snake hook, because what this allows you to do is, if I reduce the radius on this down to like 100, you can kind of like extrude the ends off like this, and you can see it gets a bit weird. We've kind of made like a Korok bat. So depending on your geometry, right, you might not have enough divisions to use this, but it can be nice just to give like a bit of an upward turn maybe on his arms. It's a bit of a pose like that. He looks a bit more dainty, a bit more demure. So we'll give him something like that, okay? Now right now we kind of just have like a fat penguin egg. We want to add some horns up here, so we're going to actually turn symmetry off, because this part is non-symmetrical, okay? And it'll be the same for whatever Korok you're making. In my one in particular is pretty much the same one from the video that we made. I'm not going to go into like specifically one of the orthographic views. I'm just going to kind of freehand it here. We're going to have one big horn come up like this, and then maybe what we can do is use the snake hook to kind of have that come out further. But that looks a little bit too much. Maybe let's reduce this down to like 90, because we want this to come to a bit of a point. Maybe something like that. And then we can just smooth out the transitions. And any weirdness there. You can see we're getting the pole of the cylinder up here, but don't worry about it, because we're going to remesh it anyway. If you're not aware, whenever you're creating character models, generally you will remesh things, because when you're sculpting, the topology isn't going to be particularly fine for animation, and it's important that topology is good for animation, so that when things deform, they don't look weird, so you don't get weird poles like this. But we'll get into that in a bit when we actually come to do the retopo. So let's reduce that again. I'm going to have another little bit come out here, and again we're just using the snake hook tool. Have a bit come out like that. Okay. Maybe we'll make that slightly thicker. We'll bring it up to like 35. Let's go bloop. Okay, that looks good to me. And then we might be able to get away with just using the snake hook tool alone here to draw something out. Let's change this up to like 65. And then we can go wah, just to bring out the extra. Maybe 75. Something like this. And then we'll just smooth out that base. Okay, and that's basically, you know, how you create a Korok. So that really didn't take very long at all. We just kind of did it from a sphere. I might try and get these to be a bit more pointed off. If I reduce this to like 25. Something like that. Maybe this comes back a little more like that. Okay, that looks pretty good to me, if I do say so myself. They're very, very simple shapes. Good things to start with for sculpting if you've never done it before. Okay, cool. So now that we have our base shape, we're going to make the leaf in Maya, actually. This is kind of a dual tutorial, I know I said at the beginning. We're just doing the sculpting in Blender. It's free. A lot of people use Blender, and I just think the sculpting tools are better. So we are going to come down to remesh. Okay, and this takes a bit of trial and error sometimes, because you can see our model very dense, too dense. We don't want it to be that dense. I mean, we could take that actually. That's probably not too bad, but I'll just show you how it works anyway for the sake of it. So this takes a bit of trial and error because you might not get the enough density that you need. So we'll just go ahead and give it a save, just in case it crashes. Always save. I'd save like a paranoid amount, because I'm always worried about things crashing, and it does happen. Then we'll try a remesh. Okay, so you can see it has done it for us, but it is a bit low poly for our liking. So I'm going to reduce the voxel size down to like 0.01 instead, and then that will take a bit longer. But it will remesh it for us. That's slightly higher. But that seems a bit too high, so we'll do like 0.05. Okay, perfect. And then what we'll do is we'll then take this in, and we will remesh him in Maya properly with the quad draw tool. So what we'll do is we'll go ahead and export this guy. I'm just going to take him over here to wherever my project folder is. Make sure that you have like a nice clean working area. We're going to export him as an OBJ. Okay, and I'm just going to name this Korok underscore sculpt, but call him whatever you like. Call him Dave, if that's what your Korok's name is. Okay, then we'll open up Maya and we'll bring him in. Okay, now that we have Maya open, we're going to go ahead and import our Korok boy over here. And here he is. Let's just bring him up so his little feetsies are touching the ground of our grid. And there's a little bit to do with this now, okay? So the front side will be this side. And what we want to do is, the topology on this is horrendous. So we want to remesh this. So the best way to do that is by using a mixture of live surface, which we've gone into a little bit in other tutorials, but never much into great depth. So we'll start by doing this. We're going to just rename this as Korok base mesh, and then okay, so we're gonna select our mesh, and then we're gonna press this little magnet button up here, and what this will do is make it live. Essentially what that does is anything we do now will snap to the surface of this guy, and he is a hefty guy. Jesus. I think what I'll do actually is rotate him around, because I want this side to be the front, and that's the way we sculpted it. Okay, So we'll turn that on, and then what I'm going to press on the keyboard at the same time, hold down Control, then Shift, then Q. That's going to enable quad draw. And what that will allow us to do is, if I left click, you can see we can place points. We can also hold down left click and move these around. If I place 4 of these, right, and then I press and hold down Shift, you can see this little green square comes up here. I'm just going to left click. That then creates a polygon. An individual polygon, which we can then also move around, but you can see here it snaps to the surface. Also, if I hold down Tab, you can see these edges here highlight green and a little extrude prompt comes up. If I hold down left click, we can extrude an edge out and create another polygon. You can also do it manually by, again, left clicking, placing your vertices and hold down Shift. And that will just automatically find where those need to go. Okay, so using this, we are going to create our remeshed version. Now, the trick with this is to start slow, because if we're just going one tiny little square at a time, we're going to be here for a million years, and no one wants that, okay? So we're going to start simple, and then we'll subdivide later. Also, for some of this, we're just going to be doing half up to about here, so that we don't have to do both sides. We can just duplicate it across, because except for the top part, he is symmetrical. Okay, so we'll start by placing points here, 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 and here. The reason for this, just turn off the grid as well, we can see a little better with this button up here, is because we want to go around in a circle around the base of his little feetsies. And the reason for this is because the topological flow of your mesh is very, very important, especially if you want to animate this or pose him later. Okay, so around like joins like this, you want nice even ringed topology in order to support any deformation. Okay, so I've done 1, 2, 3, 4, and we'll do a total of 8 to go around here. Okay, so it's just a little something to consider, and we'll bring these points around to the base, and then try and keep this like relatively square. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And we just want to make sure this is kind of circular, not coming down the leg. We're kind of circular here around the base of the feetsies. I will just keep calling them feetsies. Okay. And then we want this edge here to maybe come to about the middle. Okay. Like so. Maybe we can add an extra loop in there, but no, we'll do that later. Okay, next what we'll do is we'll just position these a little better. Okay, then we'll start bringing these edges up. Okay, just again holding down Tab and then extruding up again here, and it should, if you bring it close enough, you can see there it's snapped. If I just do that again, separate, right? If I move that, it will snap the vertices. So just make sure you're paying attention to do that as well whenever you are extruding. Okay, and we're just going to bring this up in layers like this, okay? Again, try and keep them as square as possible. Don't worry if they're a little off in the beginning, that's okay. Okay, it can get a bit tricky here, you know, because we might have, like, you might not be sure when to extrude off in this direction and not connect this point. I would say around about here is okay. So don't worry about it. Just keep it simple. Just copy what I'm doing and you'll get there. Okay, so we'll bring up again. If I hold down Tab and then middle mouse drag, it will take up the entire edge. Okay, so then that just helps us, sorry, getting tongue twisted, speed this up a little more. So it gets a little bit more fiddly here because we're coming up to the arms. Okay, so we just want to bring this up so it's around about level. It looks like he's kind of wearing a pair of pants right now, but don't worry, it will turn into what we need. So we are going to start making the topology around his arm. Okay. So in order to do that, we are going to create some vertices like this. Okay. Then we'll start coming around. We probably want this to have about 8 divisions as well. So it's just paying attention to your edge flow. And then I'll go ahead and manually put in some points here, just where we need them to be, and then but. Okay, and there we go, there's our 8. And then we'll just pull these up to around the base again. Okay, and then pull out to make them a bit more square. Again, especially with characters, very important you keep nice square topology. It now looks like he's wearing a pair of dungarees, but eventually we'll cover him all in this blue in our new faces. Okay. Don't worry about these ones getting a bit uneven. We can go ahead and tweak it as we go. Again, just pulling these straight out. Try and keep this center line here around the center of the mesh. We can fix it very, very quickly later, but it's just good practice, I think, to keep it relatively even as you go. Okay. Then what we can do is we can pull these two up. And I think what I'll do now is I'll bring these actually up all the way to the point where we want to stop. Okay. Put in the rest of our points. Bring that round. Bring this edge over here, because that's getting a bit too rectangular. Let's be more square. Okay, then we can just hold down Control, and this is kind of like the multi-cut tool, right? And then if you just middle mouse click, that will then put that in the middle, and it'll automatically snap. So, the next thing we can do is, if you hold down Shift on your keyboard, you can see a little tooltip comes up under your mouse called Relax. So if I just hold down left click and start doing that here, you can see it's going to, while the mesh is still adhering to the body, it's kind of relaxing the topology and just evening it out automatically for you. You can even press B on the keyboard and hold down B and then middle mouse drag. That will, like soft select, is also working on our quad draw tool. So I like to do that at this stage just to smooth some things out and make that as even as possible. We've got some faces that are slightly bigger than others, but that's okay. You are going to get stuff like that. As long as you're getting mostly even quads, it really is okay. Some areas are going to be more dense than others, especially on his belly here because he has a big one. Something I might do quickly here is just fix this area up. I think we can do better here. We can probably do with having this be a separate piece, like a ring round here, right? Like the arms. Then we can draw this out like so. Okay, and then again just relax that a little. Let me pull this out. Okay. Okay, great. So what I'm going to do then is I'm just going to press W to take us out of quad draw, and I'm just going to turn off make live for the time being. I'm going to hide our base mesh. Okay, so you can see here part of our Korok. What I'm going to do is I'm going to come to the top view, just pressing space. If you can't get to the top view like this, just press this little button over here. This will bring you over to 4 views. And then press space again just to come into that view. I'm going to select all these edges, okay. It's going to bring up this little gizmo, right? If I press R on the keyboard, or you can press here to come to scale. This here is your scale in X, okay. And now we want this side here to be perfectly aligned with the center of our grid that you can see here, okay. If you want to turn your grid back on, if it's off, just press this button up here. So I'm going to hold down left click, and I'm going to drag it towards the mesh. You can see that flattens it out perfectly. Okay, next thing I'm going to do, make sure all those edges are selected, hold down X on your keyboard, and then going back to the translate tool, pressing W on the keyboard, I'm going to hold down X, then left click, and that will snap that directly to the center of the grid, okay? So now if I go ahead and duplicate this guy, and then do minus in Z, or X, sorry, that will then take that over to the other side, just freeze the transforms. I can then go mesh, hold down space, go to mesh and combine, and then hold down space, go to edit mesh, and then merge. So that will now make that one piece. Okay, now we've got his body. If I go ahead and re-enable the mesh, turn on the live surface again, come back over to our quad draw tool with Control-Shift-Q, turn on soft select, we can then snap our vertices back. So I'm just holding down left click on these top ones here. Okay. We can then make sure this is all nice and smooth and even that out a bunch for us. Okay, just really give it a bit of a go. Okay. Ah, I'm an idiot. There's one thing I just forgot to do. We need to do the arms and legs. So actually, let's go ahead and undo that. Let's put that back in the center. Okay. But we will be extruding, we will be taking that back across later. Let's go ahead and do the arms and legs. So I'm going to hold down tab and middle mouse drag. Okay. To bring that down. Sometimes I like to come out of edit mesh mode or out of make live surface mode just to edit the topology a little bit myself, because especially in areas like this it can get a bit fiddly when you're using quad draw. Things don't quite align properly. And then we can come back into quad draw and then just snap that back on. Okay. And around here you might need to keep moving the vertices individually yourself, but this is why we're keeping it as low poly as possible at this stage, because otherwise it does get a bit fiddly and we don't want that too much. Okay, we'll pull down once more and we'll make sure this is coming down close to the bottom of his foot. Something like this. Okay, then we're going to come out of the make live surface and we're just going to fill this hole. If you hold down shift, right click, and then go to fill hole. Okay. I'm then going to circularize this, just with this button up here, and just rotate it so it's even. I'm then going to use the multi-cut tool. I'm going to hold down shift and right click, and then go to multi-cut, or you can just press it up here in the modeling toolkit. And I'm just going to fix the topology up here. Right, so this is 8 sides. We only need those 2 to make that a quad. Okay, and then what I also like to do is just do a little inset with the extrude, just to give us a bit more topology. Okay, then we can then come back to live surface, just on our base mesh, Control Shift Q again, turn on soft select, and then we can just snap that to that. Okay. Then what we can also do is just make sure this looks even, which it does for the most part. Maybe we'll add an extra edge loop in there, and just soft select, relax it all. Okay. Then we'll do the exact same here. So this is literally the same process. You might need to adjust the vertices here, especially underneath his little armpits. Because that area can get, you know, quad draw doesn't always do the best in resolving that. Okay, again, we'll pull that down. Okay. Oh. Okay. Just trying to keep that even. And then maybe one more time. You can see right here at the ends it is starting to struggle a little bit, but that's okay. To bring this edge up a bit. Don't be afraid as you're going as well to hold down shift and just relax these edges so that this comes out nice and even. Okay, then like with the legs, what I'm going to do is select these faces, hold down shift, right click, go to fill hole, if it will let me. There we go. Then we're going to multi-cut tool and do the exact same thing. Okay, I'm just going to convert this to a circle again. Make sure that's rotated kind of correctly. Okay, maybe we'll pull that out, kind of scale it down a bit. Like so, and then we'll just go ahead and extrude in one again just to give us that extra geo. Come back to our live surface, and then again we'll just smooth that out. Okay, not too much. Just relax that geometry. Okay, there you go. Now our guy, our clean geometry has arms and legs. So now we can go ahead and copy that across. We'll just make sure that that is solid like so. Okay, again, we're gonna go to edit mesh or mesh and combine, then edit mesh and then merge. You might see that making new groups sometimes in your outliner. Just go to edit, delete all by type and history. That will get rid of that for you. Okay. We'll then go ahead into this mode again, into quad draw, and we'll just make sure these are snapped to our surface as evenly as possible. Okay, now what we can do is we can start building up towards these spines. So we'll do the smaller one on the right, just to practice it. Okay. So what we can do is we can start by maybe taking these two up here. And the topology here, you're going to have to take a bit more time, because this area is a little bit more complicated. So we are going to have to start using smaller quads here. Maybe we'll bring this up one as well. And don't worry if this point is getting a bit tricky. Perfectly understandable. I used to struggle with this quite a lot, especially if you've not used quad draw too much. It can be a bit, confusing as to what you should do. But like everything else, we want to keep this to about 8 divisions. So I'm just going to start by making the base around. Okay, then that should be 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sure, that's only 6. So we need 2 more. Don't be afraid or feel bad about counting it. I still have to do that sometimes. Even on my fingers, occasionally. Okay. Then we'll add the extra ones that we need. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, there we go. Okay, so that forms the base of that one horn there, if they even are horns, I don't know. They don't really look like horns, they're all part of the same body. Who knows how Koroks are made, to be honest. It's probably best we don't think about it. Okay, so that's the base of that one, and then we can pull this out as well. We can start, we can add like a quad here, and then have this come out in this direction. Okay, and then that just resolves that quite nicely. Then we can pull that up, which we'll do in a moment. I'll just make the bases of these first, just to show you how that's done. Okay, remember we'll pull all of this up, make sure that snaps. It's having a bit of trouble around the back here, that's okay, we'll just give that the help that it needs. And this is what I meant by getting a bit more fiddly up at this stage. Okay, what we can even do, in fact I like to do, even though it takes a bit more time, is just start adding some points yourself, just because it gives you a bit more control, and it doesn't take that long, since it's quite simple. But I would not go any more complicated than this at this stage, otherwise you really are going to have a nightmare. Again, we'll just do a bit of relaxing. Just to keep that even. Okay, any big kind of rectangle shapes like this we can fix up in a bit. Okay, perhaps let's start bringing this guy up. In fact, what we can do then also is, if we connect these. Okay. So then what we're going to do is we're just going to create the 8 quads around here. So we'll start with these two. Add our next ones, like so. Okay. Let's make sure 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we just need 2 more up here. So 7 and 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay. And then we'll just make sure this matches here. Okay, perfect. And we'll bring that round again. Okay, there you go. And you can see, when you break it down, it's kind of simple. You're kind of just extruding the shapes, making sure that you have your bases around here, and then you're just building off of that, right? And if done correctly, you can see this all just maintains quads. And it's pretty simple to control, because the mesh is simple. right? We might be lacking a little bit in topology here. This is starting to get a little chunky. So maybe here instead what we can do is pull these two out like this. Don't be afraid to undo things from time to time as well. You know, like I just did there. From time to time you have to do that. Okay, a lot of this, like, so you can see up here it's starting to get a little bit like jagged, just because this part of the mesh is a bit bigger. So just make sure we have 8 edges, 8 faces, sorry. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We've only got 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We've only got 6 here, so we need to get a few more in somehow. We might not be able to do that. That's okay. We can live with 6. And once we add some more topology, because we'll be dividing this once, at least, to give us that extra. Okay, and then like with the arms and legs, we're literally just going to pull this up. Like so. Do a bit of smoothing. A bit of relaxing, which I'll be doing a lot of later because it's Sunday while I'm recording this. Okay, and exactly like how we did before, we're going to come out of our live surface. We're just going to fill the hole here. And now this is only 6 sides, so we need to do that. We'll add our extra extruded faces for a bit more detail. If that's going too fast, by the way, just right click here and go to slowest. That will then give you more control. Okay, we'll then come back into live surface. And I'm actually just going to select these vertices and snap those myself. And then maybe now we'll go into quad draw. Just reduce the amount that's relaxing. Okay, that's going to need a bit of cleaning up probably afterwards, but that's okay. What we'll do then is we'll just go ahead and relax what we've made so far. Okay, but you can see very quickly it's starting to take shape. We'll just fix up the rest of these ones. Sometimes it can be a bit tricky if the edges and vertices are a bit too far away, so feel free just to move those temporarily. Got an extra point floating in space. So if that happens, just hold down Control, Shift, and then you can left click on edges or faces to remove them. Also the vertices as well, you see we've got one there. Just kill that. Okay, maybe we'll do a tab and left click to pull that out. Add an extra edge. Smooth. Pull out again. Okay, we're getting some overlapping ones here, so just fix that up. You can see because the topology is quite low, it's going to start having a hard time following the shape, but that's okay. And yep, we'll do the exact same thing. I'll just go ahead and circularize this. Okay, we'll fill the hole. And then add our extra ring on the inside. Maybe with this actually we'll just do it ourselves. What you can also do is select an edge, hold down Shift, right click, and then go to Edit Edge Flow, like we explained in other tutorials. Just to do a bit of manual cleanup yourself, that's what I like to do towards the end. But that is starting to get there. And then we'll just do our last horn here. So we'll pull that up once. You can also relax the edges here if you specifically start on the edge. If you start down here and then try to do the edges, it won't work because it kind of protects them. But if you start relaxing with shift the edges first, then it will do those instead of other things. It's kind of like a selection based process. But it's not foolproof. Oh. Just want to make sure those aren't merging together. It'll probably come up one more time, and then we'll do the rest ourselves, just because it's going to be easier. Flatten that off. Circularize. Sometimes I kind of like to circularize other parts as well, just because it can create cleaner topology, but we'll get to that in a moment. We'll pull that up and rotate it a little, make it more of a finer point, bring it back in line. Okay, then we'll fill hole. Okay, then we'll just extrude in once. Maybe bring that up for our extra points. Okay, cool. So what I'm going to do now is we're going to select our mesh. We're going to come back to edit edge or to live surface, and we're just going to add in a few more edge loops just for areas here, like where we're getting like more rectangular quads, which we don't really want. So we'll just add in a few more loops, and then we'll just relax those to even them out a bit more. Okay. Same in places like the arms. We just want those to be pretty nice and square, or as square as possible. And you might need to do a bit of relaxing afterwards. Okay, great. So now we have our mesh. There's a few things we need to take care of here, because you can see there's some issues. And when we smooth, it's looking a bit lumpy in places. So the reason why that's happening is because the topology is not dense enough really to support this. So what I like to do is, we do have this entire edge running down the middle. That's okay. What I like to do is actually go ahead in and start editing the edge flow myself. I have it bound to F1, but you can just use the left mouse button, double click to select an edge loop. Okay, hold down shift, right click and go to edge flow, and then press G just to repeat the action. I like to start editing the edge flow a little bit myself, just to make sure things are nice and even. Like here, right, especially when you get these kinks. And that will just iron out any of those issues for you. So we'll do a little bit of that, especially on the arms and legs, where things are looking a bit funky. I'm not too worried about maintaining the symmetry at this stage, because we don't want it to be perfectly symmetrical anyway. Where's the fun in that? Okay, that's starting to look a little cleaner. We can do the same up here. And I also will do a bit of circularization. And then we'll refine some of our points a little bit as well. We'll just extrude ourselves. Okay, then we'll edit the edge flow again. We can also edit edge flow on these side ones here, just to smooth this out quite a lot more. Okay, we've got a bit of a lump here, but honestly I don't know whether I mind that too much. Maybe it is a bit lumpy, you know? Oh, we could fix that a little bit. Go on then. We'll just bring that in slightly. then maybe what we'll do is we'll go ahead and circularize these. Okay, there we go. So that is our mesh. So what I'll then do is we'll go ahead and subdivide this once. So I'm going to select the entire thing. I do just want to make sure this line here is going perfectly down the center, just for any future changes. Okay, we'll select the entire mesh, hold down Shift, right click, and then go to Smooth. Okay, we could do that twice. I'm probably going to do it twice, just because that gives us a good amount of topology. And you can see now that's very clean. We're getting these nice loops at the bases of the arms. We've got more geometry down here, but that makes sense. You're going to want that for extra deformation. And the topology is nice and smooth throughout. And that is our smooth Korok boy. Next thing to do is going to be to make his mask. His feet have got a little bit balloony at the base here, so we could just flatten it off a bit using soft selects and just reverse scaling. There we go. Okay, cool. So our original Korok is actually a bit fatter. So what we could do is, before we subdivide for that second time, we can just go back one last time to make that live surface, and then because now we have more geometry to play with, we can then kind of like conform him a bit more to the surface again, like especially on the body, just to make sure he's got that roundness that we created initially in Blender. Okay, now we're kind of done with the base mesh, so we'll go ahead and hide that. We might need to clean up some of this again, just because sometimes the relax tool doesn't work amazingly. But the good thing is we can clean this up ourselves. Okay, we might need to snap that a little more around the base of the legs. Okay. Then just do some edit edge flow. Okay, a little more. Okay, just tweaking some more to make sure this guy is as smooth as we can make him. Bit of lumpiness. We could also use some of Maya's sculpting tools. I don't like to use them too often. Over the sculpting tab here, there's a smooth tool there, which we can use just to even some things out a little. Works quite well to like shape these up. There's a bit of a dip there that I don't like too much. So maybe we can use this tool here to move this out a bit. And on the front here too, I think. Okay, there we go. That is our Korok. He is looking pretty smooth. Okay, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and do our last level of subdivision, and we have our smooth Korok boy. Okay, what we'll do is next we'll go on to making the leaf. So this is what my reference looks like. And this is the one that we made in the video as well. So we're basically going to recreate that same kind of leaf. So what I like to do is just start with a plane. And then we'll reduce the subdivisions to that to 0, or to 1 even. And then we'll just scale it up roughly to around about the right size. And we'll just place that in front of him. We'll come to our front view here, so we can kind of get this situated nicely. And just scale it up to around about the correct size. Okay. Okay, so let's start shaping this into our leaf. So looking at our reference, we need to add a few extra loops here. So I'm going to go to the multi-cut tool. I'm going to add a loop here. Okay. Then I'm going to add a loop in the middle. I'm going to come to our front view, and we're kind of going to make this a bit heart-shaped. Okay? So we're going to come like this, and then we're going to do this, right? And this is kind of the basis of our shape, but it's not quite perfect yet. We're going to add some extra loops in the middle here. Okay? Pull that down, and then we're going to pull these back up and then in slightly. Okay, so it's kind of like an inverted heart. Then we're going to add another loop here, and we're going to come in like this, right? And then pull this to a point. So this kind of gives us our basic shape. Right now it's a little small, so we'll scale it up. We want it to come around about something like this. Come into perspective view again. So it's relatively big. Okay. And then we don't want these edges here, or these vertices here, just terminating like that. So we'll bring that up to a bit more of a point, and then we'll kind of balance these out. If you're wondering how I'm getting these to slide like this, I'm holding down Control and Shift. You'll then see on my cursor it says slide, and then that will just slide those along the edge a little. Okay. Not too much, because we do want this to come to a point. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to extrude this a little. Okay. If you need to, just go to Mesh Display and then reverse. I'm holding on space there to bring up that menu. Okay. I can then smooth it, and we can see a little bit more about how this looks. So there's obviously some things here that we need to change. So we can do that by adding in more edges. So let's say we add in another one here and another one here. Okay, we now have a bit of a better shape, but it's not perfect. So let's go ahead and tweak it some. So add a bit more of a curve here. Okay. I do want this to be a little wider and then come into more of a point. Maybe something kind of like that. And we'll have these come down a bit. And I think what we'll do is we'll add another edge in here, just so that we can tweak this shape a little better and have these be a little more rounded. Maybe have these come into more. Okay, so that's looking a little bit more leaf shaped, right? More like what we want. Maybe we'll make that slightly wider. Okay, there we go. So that's kind of like the inverted heart shape that we're after. Okay, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to double click this edge here, hold down shift, right click, go to crease tool, and this will hold that edge in the middle now, right? So you can see that it's kind of keeping that sharp. What I'll do then is I'll go ahead and smooth this once, okay? And then we'll go ahead and get rid of... In fact, actually before that, let's actually add the stem in first, because that's pretty important. So we'll go ahead and add in 2 edge loops here, just so we have somewhere for the stem to come out of. This up here is going to get a little too sharp now, so maybe we'll bring that down and then pull these out slightly. Okay, but then this now gives us the geometry that we need to extrude out from the bottom to create our stem. We'll make that slightly thicker at the end and then come round like so. We'll add another edge loop. Okay, and then we'll make this thinner as well here. Okay. So that is kind of the basis of our shape. I'm going to add in a few more edges just so we can, and then edit the edge flow, just so we can keep this as square as possible, because that's going to be important later when we come to add more detail. Okay, just editing the edge flow to keep that nice and even. Okay, that is looking pretty good to me. Okay, what we can then do is, we don't want this to be too thick, maybe about something like this. Okay, just going to look at that from the top to make sure it's flat. We're then going to go ahead, come to face. I'm holding down right click and then going to face. Select one, then hold down shift and double click to select all of those. Okay, hold down control, right click, go to 2 edges and then 2 edge perimeter. That's then going to select all the edges around the perimeter of our leaf from the face selection. We're then going to select the edges that we just want to keep as hard, and then we're going to crease that like we did earlier. And you can see now that's holding our shape. Okay. We're going to want to go ahead and smooth that once. Okay. Just to add some more geometry. We're just going to select all the edges and then remove the creasing. Okay. I'm then going to go ahead and delete this middle edge. Okay, if you're wondering how I did that. I'm just pressing Control, right click, going to Edge Loop Utilities and 2 Edge Loop and delete. That will make sure any vertices are also gone. Okay, looks like we're getting some doubling up. Actually, no, that's okay. Okay, so that is the basis of our shape. What we can then do is we can now deform this to fit onto our guy. So he's quite rotund, and his belly comes out a ways, so we're going to have to rotate this a little bit. Okay, so we'll kind of just rotate it to lie roughly flat with this portion. Okay, maybe we'll scale it up slightly as well. It's like 1.01. Okay. You don't want to freeze the transforms yet, because we want to keep that. We're then going to come up to deform, non-linear, and then bend. Okay, and this is going to allow us to actually curve this in the direction that we want. So if I adjust the curvature now, you can see that's going in kind of the wrong direction, but we'll add some of that in a bit because I do quite like that. So we're just going to press E on the keyboard to bring up the rotate tool, hold down J, and then just rotate this 90 degrees, like so. Then if we do the curvature, you can now see that adds some curve to our leaf. Okay, just going to delete history on that. So it can lie kind of flat on our guy, like that. Okay, one other thing, sorry, that I'd like to do is bring up a bend tool again. I'm going to add some bend in this direction instead, the way my cursor's going. Just to have that kind of curve around him. Again, before we rotate, we're going to have to rotate this in 90 degrees again, just holding down J. And then we can add some curvature like so as well. just so that's kind of curving around his face. We don't want it to be too snug of a fit, just a little bit. Okay, and then just to give this some extra character, we'll do one more bend, and then maybe we'll have it like rotate a little bit in this direction, just to make it like a little lopsided. Looks kind of cool. Okay, there we go, and then that's the mask on our guy. We're probably going to want to add... actually, we might not need any more divisions on this, because we need to now add in the face areas, right? Like the eye holes and stuff like that. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so on my particular piece of reference, I'll show you again. There's an eye hole here, one here, and there's this little one up here, and then this little line here. So we'll go ahead and start cutting that in. So to begin with, we'll actually start with the eye holes. So we're just going to use the circularize tool to do this. So, and your Korok, you know, it doesn't have to be perfect, right? Just kind of pick generally the area that you want that to be. Take some of the faces, and that's where it will go. So maybe we'll put the first one kind of around here. And all their masks vary, you know, if you play the games. So again, it doesn't have to be exactly the same. We'll probably take... Let's go ahead and take all of these. Then extrude in a bit. Okay, then we'll circularize that. The circularize tool is honestly fantastic. Whenever you do this though, go to alignment, change it from automatic to surface per vertex. What that will do then, if I come from the side here, you can see before it's kind of lying flat, not with the curvature. If you change it to surface per vertex, it conforms to the surface a bit better. Okay, I'm just going to scale that down a bit as well, and then twist it too, so that that fits in there pretty nicely. Okay, so that's our first eye hole. We won't extrude that in right now, we're just going to kind of make the groundwork for it. We'll then go over and add our second one. So let's have another one up this way. A bit smaller this time. Offset, circularize, change the radial offset a bit, and then change automatic to surface per vertex again. And then we'll just twist it so it kind of fits a bit better in there. Okay, so let's go ahead and extrude in these two shapes. Like so. And then we're actually going to go ahead and put eye holes in here as well in a bit. Mine might look a little too high, actually, so I'm just going to go ahead and redo mine. But again, it's really up to you where you want to place yours. You know, if you're happy where yours is, then keep that. You know, this is like an artistic thing. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you're following reference and you want it to look like the reference, then by all means. But I'm not going to be too precious about it. Okay, cool. Let's go ahead and extrude those in now. Not all the way through, just enough so we have some depth. There we go, that looks good to me. Then we can go ahead and add in our little mouth part here. So I'm going to go ahead and grab the multi-cut tool and do this a little manually. Okay, so this might sound a bit scary, but don't worry, you'll be fine. Just follow along and do what I do. So we kind of want it to be in these faces here. We could just grab these faces, actually, and extrude these in. And in fact, I probably will do that just as our base. Okay, because I want mine to look a bit like the reference. So it kind of looks like an upside down, like a bit of a frown. I don't know what this Korok has to frown about, to be honest. I don't know whether Koroks have much to worry about in their lives. I would be a Korok. I kind of look like a Korok, if any of you are wondering. Slightly fatter than this, actually. But let's give him a frown, anyway. And it has kind of a high arch to it. So again, I'm just holding down Control and Shift to slide these. That's a really big frown. My goodness. Someone really upset this Korok. Maybe he's been under a rock for far too long. And then we're just going to keep this nice and even. . 'Cause, Okay, perfect. Then we'll go ahead and extrude that into around the same amount. Something like that. Okay, you can see, there we go. We have that part of the mouth. And then we can also add the shape that comes in under this eye. So again, we can go ahead and extrude in for that. Okay, again, I'm not being too precious about it. We're kind of limited here with the amount of geo we have. We could have done another subdivision, but I'm not too fussed, to be honest. Okay, we'll go ahead and extrude that into. Maybe that will just be a bit more rounded. Keep that as is. And then we can also go ahead and add one in running up the middle. You know, maybe let's just take the geometry from ours. Have one come up a little bit. Okay, perfect. So that is our mask. We've got all our different elements. The last thing to do is add a bit of a bevel to this just so it maintains its edge. So what I'm going to do is just select all the edges, all the faces, sorry, on the inside of the extrudes that we've just done. Okay, once we've selected all of those, I'm then going to hold down Control, right click, go to Edges, and then to Edge Perimeter again. Okay, I'm just going to select these two here as well because we want to keep those nice and sharp. Same with these ones here. Okay, everything else is fine. We're then going to hold down Shift, right click, go to Bevel Edge. Okay, and then that will add our bevel. Now if I press 3 on the keyboard you can see that's smooth, but that's a little too hard. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is go ahead and add these in a different way. I'm just going to use the multi-cut tool. Or in fact, what we can do is we can go to our face select again. Like so. And actually go ahead and extrude that and then just change the offset slightly. Okay, and now you can see that's gone ahead and added our holding edges for us. Like so. Okay, and then that's going to be our Korok mask. So the last thing we need to do is actually add the eyes, right? Because they're black in here, as you can see, and we'll need that to be a separate piece because they're a little raised. So to do this, just make sure I'm not isolating any of my views. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this with Control D, then press Control 1 on the keyboard to isolate it. Okay, then I'm just going to select all the back faces from the parts that we want to be black in the material. Like so. Okay, hold down space, go to select inverse. That's going to select all the faces except for the ones we just selected, then press delete. So this is now saved out kind of a shape, right, for the black bits. We're then going to hold down shift, right click and go to extrude, and then we're just going to bring these up a little. Okay, just a little, because we don't want them to be too big, just to create those shapes. What we can then do is we'll add some bevels to these, actually, to maintain their shape. So as we did before. And then just increase that a bit so it's not too sharp. Okay, and then when we smooth, we now have these as two separate bits. Okay, and then that is your Korok model, pretty much. We can go ahead and go to Mesh Display and then Soften Edge, just to see that what that looks like when it's unsubdivided. Okay, and the way we're going to add shaders to this is we're going to use a toon shader. We don't actually need UVs, because these kind of stripy bits here, we're also going to do that using procedural textures or 3D materials. We could also do it with triplanar mapping, but that might be something for another video. So, in fact, we won't need UVs for this guy at all. So, let's also go ahead and delete our base mesh because we don't need him anymore. And we do have him saved out as an OBJ. And let's just rename these to the appropriate things. So we'll go like leaf mask. And we'll go mask eyes. Oh, spell eyes correctly. And then we'll change this to Korok body. And then select all those, press Ctrl G to group, and then just Korok. Okay, and there's our boy. We'll just create a ground plane as well. So he has something to stand on. Poor guy, he's been levitating this whole time. And then we'll change the subdivision width and height to 1. And this just gives him a little place to sit. We'll also then create a bit of a backdrop. So we'll just extrude this edge up. Like so. And then bevel this. Give this maybe like 8 segments. And the reason we're doing this is when we come to render, this kind of curved backdrop like this, you'll see when we add the lighting, will just look like a smooth backdrop. Let's make it a bit wider maybe. Okay, so this is Korok's first day of his photo shoot. Ready for the runway. And then maybe let's pull this out a little more. So we just create like a nice backdrop. If you've ever looked at photography setups, they normally have something like this. Right, like if you had your photo taken at your school day, that's what we used to have. They probably had something like this. At your school day? Your school photography day, you know what I mean. I'm also going to add an extra edge here, just to keep that leaf a little harder. There, probably also here. Just to keep that a bit more creased. Okay, cool. Let's also bring him down a little more, so his feet are just touching the ground. There we go. Very daintily. And then we'll get into shading. So, first things first, we're going to set up a light. So we are just going to use if we come over to, where is it, rendering, directional light. Okay. Now, these lights, they kind of behave like the sun. It doesn't matter how big or close they are to your model, the light's kind of coming off from an infinite distance away, kind of like the sun, you know. And then this arrow is just like the light angle. So what I like to do is just adjust the render settings. We're going to press this button up here, display render settings, and I'm just going to change the preset HD 540 to HD 1080p. So we've got 1920 by 1080. And then we can look at the render settings in a bit, but we'll leave that for the time being. So if I go ahead and then press render and then change that to Arnold, you can now see we're getting some light on our guy, but it's a bit soft. So let's go over to the attribute editor with the light selected. Come down here to the Arnold tab, and we're going to change a few things. So the way lights work in render engines, path tracing render engines, is that they kind of simulate light bounces. You know, the way light works in real life, it kind of bounces around whatever environment it's lighting. And by default, the max number of bounces you're getting is 999, so nearly 1,000, which is quite a lot. We don't actually need that many. That's just going to slow down our render time, so I like to set that to like 10. I also like to set the samples to 3, just because it helps make it a little less noisy. Not that we have a lot of noise in the scene right now, but it's just handy. We'll bump up the exposure to like 1, maybe 2, just to make this nice and bright. Okay. And there is our magnificent Korok in all his glory. And you can really get the sense of his form now. And look at the way this backdrop's working as well. Like it's giving us this nice smooth backing to it. And we'll add a material to that in a second. But hang on, let's just gaze at his majesty for a second. Take it in. Okay, anyway. Let's go ahead and start adding materials to him. And we're going to be using the Arnold toon shader here, so it's kind of a double whammy tutorial. So we're going to select the body, we're going to hold down right click, go to assign new material, come to Arnold and go to AI toon, and we'll rename that to Korok body shader. Okay. You can see the color here has changed, so like this very, very matte white. I don't really like to view what the color looks like in the viewport. We'd rather do it in the render time. So if you press this button up here, it will change it back to the default. Just appearance wise, the material is still attached. We'll then do the same for the leaf. Arnold AI toon, we'll go to leaf shader. And then we'll do the same for the eyes. Go to Arnold AI toon, and then we'll go to eye shader. Okay. So we can actually leave the color on a little bit in the viewport if you want, because it could be handy for viewing the actual color of our material. So the thing you're looking to change here is the base color. So the color by Korok is a little bit kind of like a off brownish yellow. I might actually be wrong. I don't think that does show up in the viewport. We might need to leave the render going. So depending on the quality of your computer hardware, you might not be able to see or run this in real time, but if you can, it's very, very handy to do. So this is kind of like a disgusting yellow. This is too much. So we're going to adjust the color a little bit. Take out some of the contrast. Make it a bit darker. Almost more beigey. Maybe something like this. Okay. And I think I'm going to add another exposure level to our light. Maybe that might be too harsh. Maybe 2.5. Maybe we'll leave it at 2 for the time being. What we can do as well actually is change the angle here. That just makes the shadows a bit softer. And sometimes I like to actually duplicate the light, have another one coming from the other direction. Just to add a bit of extra light. Maybe we'll change the exposure on this one down to like 0. Okay, just so the shadow isn't quite as stark. Okay. What we'll do next is we'll change the color of our leaf. So base color, we're going to go for a pretty vibrant green, maybe more of a yellowish green. And again, we'll just reduce the contrast a bit and make it a bit darker. Something like that. Okay, and again, we are going for quite a cartoony look, so you don't want to make this look too realistic, color palette wise. Okay, then for this, the color is just black. I don't like to go completely black because I feel like it can look a little harsh, but there you go. And now we could leave that there, okay, because that's already looking not too bad, right? But you know, where would be the fun in that? Let's add some more shading to this, because this looks a bit basic. And the AI Toon shader is a bit more advanced than this, and we can do some cool things to make this look better. So first things first, we're going to change the render view back to viewport 2.0, so our computers don't die. I'm going to press this button up here, and this is going to bring up something called the hypershade window, where we can edit all of our shaders. If you're already familiar with like look dev and shader creation in Maya, then you will have used this before. We're just going to select all of our shaders up here, the eye, body, and leaf. We're going to press this button. That will then just bring them all to our display here, our viewport, if you like. So I like to have this up on my second screen, just so I can see what I'm doing at the same time. If not, you can just minimize it and go backwards and forwards. It will just minimize down to your tray down here. But for today, I'm going to show you how to get this to work. So let's have it on my main screen. A thing with the AI Toon shader is there's this thing here called tone map. Now, it's a little difficult to explain what this does, but essentially it's going to define how the shading or the light and shadow and highlights actually work with your model, with your material, and we can drive this using a ramp, and you'll see how this works in a moment. So if I just go ahead and render this again, you can see we're getting quite like a natural looking realistic shadow, right? Like the light's coming from this direction, we have the shadow on this side of the body, you know. Maybe let's reduce the intensity of this just to make it a little bit more obvious. Okay, so this is in shadow, right? That looks all realistic. If we come back to here and we type in AI ramp and we change it to AI ramp RGB, if you're not familiar with a ramp, it's kind of just like a gradient, right? That you can adjust, you can add extra points to it, and so on. Okay, and the reason why this is going to be handy will be apparent in a second. If I go ahead and select my body shader, okay, middle mouse click on the AI ramp RGB, and then drag that over to tone map, okay. Make sure you have the ramp selected and you're in attribute editor so you can see the attributes here. If I go ahead and render again, okay, and then start adjusting this slider, you can see now that the ramp is actually driving the appearance of the shadows, okay? And the cool thing about this is that we can make this look quite if I change this to like interpolation none, we can start to make this look quite like cartoony, hence the name toon shader, which is exactly what we want. So we're going to have this first one here be white. Okay, now white is what's perfectly lit, black is what is perfectly in shadow. Okay, so we're going to have maybe our shadow come to about here. Okay, but then what we can do is we can add a secondary one in between here, and then maybe make this somewhere between black and white. Now you can see we're getting this second band, and this is the really cool thing about the toon shader, is you can make very stylized looking highlights and shadows. Okay, and then you can have this be as detailed as you want it to be. I could add a secondary one in between here again. Okay, and have that be between those two. And now you see we're getting another band. And I could add another one in here and have that between these two. And you can now see we're getting this very, very stylized shadow with these nice kind of elements here. What you could do is you could change the blending style all to like smooth, and that will smooth out the shadow for you. But I quite like this look here with this kind of like very hard shadow. Okay. So we can do that. And then you can just play around with this here, so that you can like decide how heavily shaded one element is, or I like to have it kind of like this. You can even remove some if these are like if it's a bit too complicated. Maybe I think for us today we'll just go with let's go with 3, so we're not overdoing it. Okay, and I'll just have it like this. Okay. If I go ahead and close that, I can then also take this and apply this same ramp into the tone map for our leaf shader. For the eye shader, we're going to leave it blank because we just want those to be black, regardless. So we're going to take that, put that into the leaf. If I come back to this view now, you can now see we're also getting that on the leaf as well. But you can see it's not working exactly the same. Okay, so this is why, while sometimes you could use the same ramp, I like to actually duplicate the ramp with Control D, and then plug that into the tone map, and then modify the ramp for the leaf individually. Okay, just because the shapes are a bit different. And we're not getting quite as much shadow as I would like on the leaf. Okay, so now you can see we're getting a much more stylized shadow on there. And this will adjust also, by the way, related to the light. So if I go ahead and start rotating this around, you know, we can have him lit directly from the front like this. It looks like a police mugshot. I don't know what this Korok's done. But you can see the shadow still adjusts. Normally, it just changes the appearance. Okay. We can also use this for the specular to add highlights. So let's do this with the leaf to begin with. So if we select the leaf shader and then we turn up the specular, maybe let's put the weight up to like, if you put it all the way up to 1, by the way, it's just going to make it perfectly reflective, which is why it's black. It's like reflecting the background. I'm going to set it to like 0.5. Okay. And then we can go ahead and let's duplicate our ramp. Okay. Okay, I'm actually just going to adjust our gradient a little bit here because I don't like quite how dark those shadows are. So we're just going to lift that up a little bit, just so they're not completely black. Maybe something like this. Okay, and then we'll do the same for our other gradient too. Just so it's not quite so intense. There we go, that looks a bit better. Okay, so yeah, the gradient for our specular, we'll go ahead and do the exact same thing. So we'll drag this over to the tone map. Okay, then we'll come back to our view. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and adjust some of this. So that might need a little bit of adjusting to look correct. Let's turn the... Oh, we've plugged it into the body. That's why. Silly me. Plug it into the leaf shader. You need to make sure that you have some specular amount on there already, so that's why we had the weight at 0.5. Okay, let's go ahead and just delete some of these. Get rid of these extra ones. Okay, and then maybe let's turn the specular up just to full, just for the time being, so we can see that a bit better. For whatever reason, that's not updating. Very odd. What if we try bumping up the roughness? There we go. Okay, so we need to increase the roughness a little bit. And then we'll take that back. Okay, so we'll add a little bit of roughness like this, okay? So the values that seem to work pretty well here are like 0.1 in the specular, and then maybe like 0.2 in the roughness or something like that. Okay, so then now if we take our tone map from that, we'll look at an angle so we can see the light coming in properly. You can see now if I adjust this, it's kind of working the same way the shadow did. So we can bring this over to maybe like here, and then we can add a secondary one, and again, somewhere in between. The two, and then let's add another one. And have that be somewhere in between the two. Okay, maybe something kind of like that. Okay, so you can see now we're getting the tone map from the specular. We can maybe increase the roughness a bit, just so that's a bit more obvious. Okay, so you can see we're getting some of those bands now there for the specular. Maybe we'll reduce that a little more. Just because I don't want it to be too intense. Okay, so we can go ahead and duplicate these settings onto the body. And what you can also do actually as well is change the specular color to something different, which is what I like to do. So maybe like I'll make it like a brighter version of the green on the leaf. Maybe we'll introduce a bit more brightness. Could maybe even make it a little yellow. Something like that. Okay, just add a bit of extra something. Then we can do the exact same on the body. So if we go ahead and we'll duplicate our specular tone map ramp, and we'll plug that into the tone map for the specular on the body, and then we'll just go ahead and duplicate the settings just to begin with to see what that looks like. So we'll do 0.2 in the roughness and 0.15 in the actual specular amount. Okay, and you can see now we're getting some of the specular. It looks a bit rough for my liking on the body. So maybe we'll reduce some of this so it's not quite as strong. We can also adjust the ramp. Okay, and then maybe also the color as well. So to begin with, we'll make it like the same color. Okay, and then that kind of gives us our highlight. And you can see that's added a lot more dimension just from adding the ramps. We're getting like a much more cartoony look. The last thing that we can do is we can actually add the bands going up, right? Like on our reference here, you can see these kind of bands here. So we can go ahead and add that using a 3D texture. If I go back to the viewport here, just close this ramp, and then we're going to go ahead and come over to 3D textures over here, and we're going to use the marble texture, okay? And this looks, it's kind of got the bands in it, but it looks a bit intense to begin with. There's a few things that we want to change here. So the actual filler color, we want this to be the same color as the base of our Korok, right? So this color here. To grab that, we're just going to change the value here and then put it back, because then that's going to put it in the quick select list. Okay, we'll then change the color over there, and we'll change the vein color to the same, but we'll just make it a bit darker, maybe a bit more contrasty, something like that. Okay, what we'll then do is we'll take the marble out color and we'll put that into the base color. Okay. And now make sure you keep the marble selected. If I go ahead and render this now, you can see we're getting that material on here without any UVs, right? But it's a bit too patchy at the moment, so we can go ahead and change that by adjusting a few of the settings here. We kind of just need to tweak the vein width, and the diffusion will kind of adjust how much like the veins kind of bleed into the rest of the color, so we'll have a little bit of that. We can also adjust things like the amplitude, which kind of, as you can see here, we can either have perfectly straight or makes them a bit more wavy. We want to introduce a little bit of wave, but not too much, right? And the ratio will also add some waviness to that too. So maybe we'll have that like this. Or the ratio, in fact, will kind of like break up that, right? So if I have the ratio at 0, but then put the amplitude, we're kind of getting this like nice cool pattern like that. So maybe we'll have a bit of ratio. Not too much. Just to add a bit more breakup to the pattern. He's looking a bit like a leopard print. Not leopard, sorry. Like a brown zebra print Korok right now. So what we can do to fix that is we can actually come to our place 3D texture here, because it adds this extra node here. We can just scale this up to increase the number or decrease the number. You know, we could make this even smaller, have it really, or we could just have it like really big and have just a few stripes, however you like. You can see it's dynamically updating. You can even rotate it to change the way that lies. I'm going to have mine maybe kind of like this. And I think what I might do actually is adjust the vein color so it's not quite so dark. Maybe a bit more subtle. Something like that. Okay. And then that is pretty much how you can use, or a very, very like brief intro to the toon shader. So a lot of it is like you can just apply color, sure, but a lot of it is using ramps to add kind of extra detail to the highlights and the shadows and so on. One last thing we can do is we can go ahead and add a background color as well. I'm just going to use an AI standard surface because we don't, we're not going to have like a toon shader on the background. And then maybe I can make the color some sort of green, like off green, like this, like a bright foresty green. Maybe add a bit more contrast in there. Bit of a yellowed green, something like this, and then just increase the roughness so it's not so shiny. Okay, maybe let's make that a little wider, just to really give him room. We can also go ahead and potentially adjust the lighting. You know, maybe we don't want this one. Maybe we can change the way that's coming in. Maybe a bit more like that. Okay, and there you have it. That is how you use the toon shader and how to make a Korok using a mixture of Blender and Maya. You probably could do this all in Maya or all in Blender as well. Please feel free to experiment. Yours doesn't have to look exactly like mine. But yeah, I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you have any questions whatsoever, please don't hesitate to ask. Happy to answer anything you want to know or to make a follow-up video for anything you weren't sure about. And yeah, I hope you've enjoyed, and thank you very much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.